Hello, everyone, and we're very excited to welcome you to the first FITGov Summit webinar talking about AI and ChatGPT and the implications for procurement. My name is Christina Tanastruk. I'm the CEO of the Government Technology and Services Coalition that acquired the FITGov Summit last year. If you haven't heard of the FITGov Summit, it is the place for governance, procurement, and now with GTSC's acquisition, security, cyber, zero trust, and capital planning. It's been around for 14 years under the CPIC Council, and then it was under the AIM Council, and now GTSC has acquired it and put our unique spin on security, procurement, and certainly governance to make sure that new technologies are evaluated and considered properly before implementation. So today, we're very excited to welcome you to the ramp up to our date of May 24th for the FITGov Summit in person, discussing ChatGPT that's going across government, or at least being considered across government. And so today we're very, very happy to welcome Jaime Gracia, who's the Director of Strategic Enterprise Programs at the State Department. And I have to give you credit, Jaime, because this came from a conversation with you. We were talking about procurement at state, and we started talking about ChatGPT, and we were like, we need to have this conversation in front of the community and start getting some feedback. Also with us is Soraya Correa, which I'm sure all of you already know her, but we're very proud to have her as a board member of FITGov, and she's the former Chief Procurement Officer at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And last but not least is Brett McLaren, who's the Chief Strategy Officer and co-owner of Metaphase Consulting. So what we're striving to do here today is talk about ChatGPT, the implications, and how it can help make our wonderful government partners' lives easier, and making sure that they're considering everything they need to from both an industry perspective and from a government and security perspective. So with that, Jaime, I'm going to open it to you to talk to us a little bit about how you see ChatGPT being considered across government.
Sure. Thank you, Christina, and thank you everyone for joining us. Very, very excited about this technology and this space. For those that know me, I'm very passionate about automations and trying to remove friction from the procurement process. So I had been chatting about ChatGPT with Christina and some others about. I hate the cliche term, but I love it. It's art of possible, right? It's about what can we do to use these tools to really use it in a very target-rich environment, which is the procurement process, right? As we all know, federal procurement's a very a process, paper-driven exercise, and these kind of tools are perfectly made for these kind of processes. I mean, if less you are living under a rock, I don't think anyone is unfamiliar with ChatGPT, right? It's an AI-driven chatbot on natural language processing. I personally have been experimenting with it to see where there might be some utility in procurement. It's very exciting. I believe the technology is only a few months old, so it's not a silver bullet. I think there's a lot of misconception about what the tool itself can do, but it's another piece of the puzzle when we talk about just AI in general, about how we use it in procurement. But nonetheless, ChatGPT does have some use cases already. I did speak to some folks at AfterWorks with the Air Force. They do have their ActBot program, which is very similar, specifically focused on procurement, and it works the same way, right? Which is you tell the tool as a chatbot, hey, write me a requirements package for this kind of capability, and then of course with more detail, the better results you're going to get. But as any AI tool, right, it's all about the data layer and extracting data from that data layer. So that's where ChatGPT currently, I would say, has the largest weaknesses and holes, right? Because I think it's still a prototype, but nonetheless, where can it be used? And the way that I'm looking at it is around the periphery of the acquisition process, because it would be great if it were mature enough where we can say, hey, write me a complete requirements package for buying cloud in this environment. and then boom, it pops it out, and you just saved yourself a year of work. That's kind of I think the goal of where a lot of these tools want to be. But certainly with ChatGPT, it is an opportunity now to really consolidate the types of thinking. For me, certainly, I'm using it to experiment with statement of objectives, right? And I think that's a good thing, because when we start taking a look at technology and technology purchases, and I mentioned cloud specifically, right? I would love to get out of the world where we spend 8 to 10 months or longer around that time frame, writing hundreds and hundreds of pages of documentation for a requirements package. Can't we just do all this in a 5-page statement of objectives using best class and industry standards for these things, and then customize it into our world with FedRAMP and those kind of requirements? I think there's a lot of utility in there, and I'm seeing some promising results. But one thing that I was on a call yesterday, just kind of thinking about today's call, where we on right now, because we're sitting on about 2.3 terabytes of data from a lot of previous scanning and OCRing of contracts data, right? So I'm like, ooh, so that's an opportunity now to ingest the data, and we're doing that, but just to make it searchable. Now I would love to put like a chat GPT on top of it and really turbocharge that. I mean, that's kind of where we want to be. But as government, and we'll certainly talk about this, right? What are the roadblocks to innovation, right, that we just face with these kind of technologies? And it's about, talking about ethics, talking about usage, skill set, workforce, and really being AI ready, right, as an organization. And that's kind of where we at State Department have had some problems with that, and we're working on that so that we can take advantage of these technologies. But the future for ChatGPT, I think, is pretty bright, because it's an opportunity now to really try to lower the amount of paperwork, I'm hoping, and standardize things. That's what I would love to do. It's never going to completely customize solutions, but if I can use a ChatGPT to save myself some time and say, hey, look, I'm trying to get my head around how I would solve this problem. I can put some information in ChatGPT, see what results I have, and then just put it out for industry comment and saying, hey guys, we have this need and this idea of thinking, and we use ChatGPT to kind of help us with some frameworks and some foundational materials. What do you guys think about this, right? And that's where we can start the dialogue. And I just mentioned that as another use case to really start engagement with industry early and to help us understand better what we're trying to do. Because as we know, oftentimes in government, we either don't really know what we need or what we want, and we often struggle on how we get it. So again, with ChatGPT, is like, hey, who are the vendors in this space, right? How do we take a look at possible acquisition strategies to acquire these things, right? Where are they being done now, right? Who do I talk to, right? ChatGPT is just on the forefront of solving some of these issues to really help not only with the pre-solicitation phase, where I see a lot of utility, but also in the post-contract award phase, because oftentimes in government, it's like we award the contract, it's like, okay, guys, good luck. And then we go on to the next one, and we forget about real good contract administration, contract management, and performance documentation. I really see ChatGPT as being an opportunity to leverage that kind of capability as well. So I mean, I can go on and on. As you
No,
know, I'm very
absolutely.
passionate about this, but that's kind of where I'm seeing the future of this kind of solution. But it's very exciting because I think AI is really going to be the game changer in procurement as we move forward in the future. And there's quite a lot happening in the space. So it's a really exciting time to be involved in it and to really leverage the capabilities to advance the modernization of federal procurement.
Absolutely. And I have to give a compliment to all of our speakers, because yesterday's prep call was like fun. And that's usually not the case. Everybody knows those prep calls are kind of deadly. But, talking with Soraya and Brett and Jaime about just the possibilities is amazing. So Soraya, tell us what you're thinking about ChatGPT and its potential. You're on mute, and so was I telling you that you're on mute.
There you go. I forgot to put on my t-shirt that says you're on mute. Anyway, so first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, especially with my two colleagues here. So I'm a huge fan of AI, ML, you name it, right? Anything anything that can simplify the process and move it along more efficiently and more effectively, and gets us away from the paperwork fire drills. I come from the school of thought that we gain much more when we engage in dialogue, not only with industry, but across the spectrum in our government, when we're sharing ideas and talking to one another. And you can't do that effectively with paper. You really need to be having conversations. So a little bit about AI and ChatGPT. I'm excited about the technology as well, but I'm also concerned about the technology because I do want to make sure that we don't forget that the technology is only going to be as good as the algorithm behind it and the data that we put into it. And that's just the bottom line. You know, when people talk about ethics in AI and bias in AI, I always choke a little because those things cannot be ethical or biased. What's ethical or biased is the individuals that are building the algorithms, designing the system, and executing on the capability. So what I would say is, I think it has great potential in procurement, especially when you think about file documentation, when you think about the things that you need to be thinking about as you're putting together your RFP. I don't know that you could ever use it to put together your RFP. There's tools to do that for you, but I do think it can help your thinking. And I'll give you an example. I went in and asked it, what should I think about when I want to purchase cloud services? What are some of the key features that I should consider? It gave me a really nice list of things that could be used as evaluation criteria, whether it's scalability, security, cost, reliability, etc. So that's what I mean about it can really be used for those supporting decisions that you have to make when you're building your acquisition strategy, whether you're building an acquisition plan, your evaluation criteria, or what have you. That's where I think this is a benefit. I don't know that I would go out and use it to identify companies that might be able to do this work, because I already saw a little bit of an inherent bias. When I asked who are some of the companies out there that do these kinds of work, it only listed certain really large companies, right? So that's what I mean about you want to be careful in how you use it, and people have to use it smartly. Understand that over time it will continue to get better as more data is fed into it, but understand what you're getting back and use it practically. Have that discussion with your peers about what you're seeing, and then share that with industry, because industry is going to give you invaluable feedback. Nothing, and I mean nothing, will substitute for the judgment of people, right? You still have that decision-making capability, and that discussion amongst your peers is what's really going to drive you to the better procurement solution. But can it expedite procurement? Certainly. Can it support a contracting officer better understanding the technical requirements and the technical capabilities that they seek to advance through the RFP? Definitely. I just went in there and asked some questions about just topics that I was interested in. Comes back with really good information. Is it complete? Is it 100% accurate? Maybe not, but it gives me enough that I can have now an intelligent conversation with my peers and say, here's what I understand about this. What are we trying to achieve? How can we get there? So I'm definitely a fan of anything that takes a little bit of paperwork, a lot of paperwork, excuse me, off of the contracting officer's desk, but we need to train people on how to use the technology and when it's effective and when it's not.
Well, that's the exciting part is, you know, we're literally at the cutting edge, like every other day. There's some cutting edge that you all are hearing about and having to accommodate and understand, and certainly implementing it and rolling it out is a Herculean task. So Brett, from industry's perspective, how do you see this making your lives easier?
I can't help but be so excited about this technology. I don't want to overstate it here, but I almost feel like this is one of those BC versus AD moments in history. You know, there is your life and what you thought the future might look like before you had tried ChatGPT. And suddenly, just after a few minutes with this thing, everything about what you thought about the future starts to change. And as consultants, as industry, nothing is more exciting than trying to apply a new technology like this to the federal mission. Of course, technology innovation is part of our job, but I really feel like technology application is where the industry plays the biggest role here, at least as a services company like Metaphase. And so, you know, anyone who's worked in project management, you know, the old triple constraint, scope, schedule, and cost are on the corners of the triangle there, and quality's in the middle. And And as it goes, you can't add scope without increasing cost or maybe extending the schedule. And I feel like for the first time, this technology potentially has the ability to kind of hack the triple constraint. It's possible, in theory at least, to do more, faster, cheaper, and of higher quality all at once, because we're leveraging the power of essentially every written word ever posted on the internet at this point, and the model continues to be trained on more and more. So from an industry and a government perspective, I think this technology applies to essentially every phase of the procurement lifecycle. And I'd love to talk as we go on more about some of the very tactical implications or uses that I'm seeing across industry, both within our own company and from other colleagues across industry, but really excited about the new technology.
Hey, Christina, just a quick comment. Where I think what's important is how not the procurement industry is going to look at, not those of us who run procurement look at, but those who work around us, whether it's IT, the CISOs, security, general security, as well as computer security. That's where I think you're going to find some limitations. I think security is always going to be an issue because you got so much data feeding ChatGPT, and it's going to get smarter every day, but it could also get dumber every day too, right? Because it's the quality of the data that it's using to extract information. So that's probably where I think the limitations will be. I never find, at least in my years in procurement, I never found that when we had a bright idea, it was us that stopped us. It was typically those things in the periphery that stopped us. Those that are a little bit more risk averse or a little bit more concerned with security, with ethics, with bias. They don't always want us to use our judgment when we're using these tools, right? And so that's where I think some of the ramifications are for implementing in government. And I think Jaime would agree with that. And I know that Brett probably would too.
Yeah, I mean, the risks are, I mean, they're somewhat unknown. And that's really scary, especially for lawyers, right? Is like, hey, I don't know what the risks are, so I can't mitigate them. So, forget it. You're not using this, and that's an easy way to shut it down. But like one thing that's right, I said that's really important is that, right, there's a lot of like garbage in, garbage out with any data layer for AI is right, because I did the same thing. It's like, hey, how do I buy cloud? Who are the providers, right? Just trying to think about just having conversations with people, right? And the normal cast of characters, if you will, large companies, but that doesn't help me if I have socioeconomic goals, if I have small disadvantaged business goals to meet, right? So there's a lot of niche micro thinking that needs to go into these kind of tools so that they have utility in the federal sector, so that they can now drive these kind of decisions and help us make it. Because that's some of the problems that we also have, right? Is at the end of the day, there still needs to be human interaction, right? It's like, hey, ChatGPT, do this for me. You do my job, great. So I can go hang out back while you do all my work, right? That's not how this is really developed. But sometimes these tools are seen as that silver bullet, and you have to meet expectations about what are the limitations of it and what it can and can't do. And that's something that also needs to be part of a pretty rigorous change management exercise when I talk about getting AI ready. Right. One of the most important thing is like, what are the expectations of this tool, and what is it going to do for me? Right. It's going to certainly help me do my job better, more efficiently, but it's not going to do my job. Right. And that's an important thing, certainly for the workforce to understand, is how to use it as a force multiplier, right? And how to use it effectively. And that comes with training and understanding. But again, that's why dialogue with industry is so critical, so that we're not just doing demos about the capability. We have to start thinking about long-term usage and change management earlier, right, in the process, so that when we're thinking about using these technologies, right, we're looking ahead on how we're going to integrate and implement them, right? Because certainly we have to get FedRAMP, we have to get ATO, right? We have to do all these things to actually have utility for these things. And that we need to have these discussions much early in the process, so we can be better effective at using not only ChatGPT, but AI and emerging technology in general.
So has anyone asked ChatGPT what the implications for procurement are?
I
Brett,
certainly
tell us, what did you
I
see
certainly
today?
did it as research for this, but just a couple of very simple tactical examples of where I think this could be useful in an innocuous way, because I couldn't agree more. There are risks galore. I mean, the temptation is to almost want to put your head in the sand and ignore this because it's so scary. But also what I'm finding as I've kind of gone through my own journey and us here at Metaphase, is that there are some very, very practical uses. So just as an example, the other day we looked at an RFP that was released, and there was a bunch of information about joint ventures and contractor teaming arrangements and some of these more complicated, elements to the procurement. So I typed into ChatGPT, just as an example, what sections of the FAR speak to joint ventures? I needed to understand a little bit more. And what I got back was very clear, concise, easy to understand. FAR 9.6 talks about policies and procedures around CTAs, including joint ventures. FAR 19.101 talks about joint ventures as it relates to small businesses. FAR 52.219.14, et cetera, et cetera. And it explained all these sections with then links to go read more. And I felt like that process would have normally required me to either contact a contracts professional, a lawyer, especially for a small business. It was helpful to be able to access that kind of information just, at the click of a button in a fairly innocuous use, given that this tool has been trained on the entire FAR and has seen the entire FAR and can quickly pull that information up. I similarly for proposal responses, obviously if you were to try and have ChatGPT write your entire proposal and submit it to the government, that would border on unethical and probably would be unsuccessful, right? But where we have seen some good uses are very tactical things again, but the innocuous ones are, we have a 2-page section where, or 2 pages of writing for a section, and we need to pare it down to 1 page. Okay, plug it into ChatGPT, ask it to pare this down to 1 page, but make sure to include, the 5 win themes that you wanted to make sure shine through to the government there, and it can quickly generate that for you. Or here's my whole proposal. Generate an executive summary for me that I can include in the front. And again, you wouldn't use that straight away, but it becomes an 80% solution that you can go and edit from. Another example is, hey, take this section and ensure anytime we're using passive voice to change it to active voice, or ensure anytime we're using first person, change it to third person. And within seconds, this is done. And so what I think that does is helps industry increase the quality of our proposals very quickly and reduce the cost, which allows us to focus more on the actual technical approach and solution that we're trying to develop. And from what I've heard from government, that's been one of the frustrations, is that they get a lot of junk proposals where, more time and energy is put into just getting some words on the page and getting it over to them versus a real technical solution. So that's what I'm excited about from a tactical perspective in terms of using this thing.
Well, and that's why Soraya likes oral proposals, because you do put a lot of words in it. Just kidding. I couple of things, and I definitely agree. That's a really smart usage of it. I gave an example where you could ask it, what are the things I should think about, or what does this technology mean, or who's out there working on this technology. But you also still have to do your homework, right? Like the FAR references that you gave a great example of. That's fantastic, because then when you go read the FAR, it's going to point you to this and that, and that, and that, and that. So again, that's where I think the tools have great benefit for the contracting community. Not so much to help you actually write the document, but to think about what you're putting into the document, right? And what those words will mean to the outside world, how you can simplify the language, because that's another thing that we in government need to focus on, is how we simplify the language, how we present the challenges that we confront and what the problems are that we're trying to solve. So I definitely think the tool, has great usage. Like I said, I think where it can really help contracting officers a lot is in that background thinking that goes into developing your acquisition strategy, your justifications, and those kinds, because it brings you back research. It brings you back information that you would spend weeks perhaps trying to search, or might not get back accurate data if you're just doing word searches out on Google or whatever. So that's where I think it's important. But I also want to emphasize it's a tool in the toolkit. It doesn't stand alone. And that's the most important part, I guess, of the discussion. There is no one thing that can do it all, as Jaime and both Brett said. You can't put your head in the sand and pretend this thing's going to do your job. It's not. you still have to apply thinking to it. You still have to apply your expertise, your knowledge, and understanding of the process. And you have to remember how people are going to react to what you put out there. So that's an extremely important part of the job, I think, in procurement. Over.
So I know, just to pivot just a little bit, Christina, I think IT procurements are another, large and growing element of the broader federal procurement space. And one of the areas we're also really excited about this thing and starting to see use is around how we can reduce the cost of software development and technology in general, because IT operations and maintenance is just growing by the day in terms of its percentage of spend. And what's been exciting as part of ChatGPT and other AI tools, the one most commonly sort of that people are aware of so far is called Copilot, where you're actually now able to use a model that has been trained on tens of billions of lines of code in every programming language, and use it to help you generate code or overcome issues or correct bugs more quickly. And of course, this discussion's around procurement, but what I think that can help do is eventually drive down the cost of software development. In some cases, very dramatically. I mean, I think the most recent estimates I've seen online are that developers are seeing up to a 55% increase in the amount of code they can generate in a day. And so when you think about, if you fast forward that, and we're on the first iteration of this tool, it's been out for 3 months. It's pretty powerful. I know even for us, we may have developers that can write code in Java, but not in .NET, for example, 2 different programming languages. And now you can literally, just like a translator would be from one language to another, paste in a set of code in one language and have it generate in another language, so that you can be a little bit more versatile in terms of your skill set as developers. That will help industry be more efficient with our staff and eventually lead to lower cost procurements for the government. So I think that's another pretty exciting element here.
Yeah. So a couple things, just to pivot back for a second. So I love, to Soraya's point, I too love oral presentations, right? But I was experimenting with ChatGPT. I was like, hey, write me a use case for this specific mission parameter. And I was like, hey, and I looked at the output. I'm like, oh, this is awesome, because what I could do is I can provide that to a vendor on the day of a proposal and say, here's your use case. You got 30 minutes. Here's your oral presentation, right, as part of the orals itself. So that might be an interesting way to do it. So I had and to Brett's comment about ChatGPTs for proposals. So I had a really interesting discussion with some contracting officers who are very forward leaning. And I was a little bit surprised at some of the answers, because they're like, well, what if ChatGPT is used to write a solicitation or a proposal? Like, we can't accept that. I mean, I'm like, well, why? I mean, if a company is just stupid enough to like just let ChatGPT write a proposal and that's what it's submitted, what's the difference between that or hiring another company to write a proposal for you, right? At the end of the day, right, you have to have that interaction with the people to ensure that the outputs are correct. So, again, it's not a one size fits all kind of thing here. But I don't care where the responses are coming from, like ChatGPT or a professional proposal writer, $500 an hour, right? Did you meet the requirement, right? Are you going to solve my problem? At the end of the day, those still remain. But with the code issue, that scares the bejesus out of me, because right, there's a huge risk there, right? How do I know that code is secure, right? And that's still a skill set that is still, I would argue, it's getting much better, certainly, but nonetheless, like just the thinking of like DevOps and DevSecOps, more importantly, right? That's still not ingrained in federal culture yet, certainly for software development. So there's a lot of trust that needs to happen, and we're going to zero trust, and that's where we need to be. So the code is, yeah, I agree, there's a huge amount of potential, but how do we know that code is secure? Because that's what scares me, right, is unscanned code made by ChatGPT or some other tool, right, that gets into our networks, and right, again, with the biases that are made by algorithms or bad actors using it. right? That's a really scary frontier. Not that I don't think we should shut the door entirely, but there is a lot of questions and issues that need to be answered before we start using that kind of tool for it. So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways to streamline it, but nonetheless, it scares me a lot.
That's a great segue, though. Oh, I'm sorry, Sarai. Go ahead.
Make a comment. You're probably going where I'm going to go. Believe it or not, we're finally, if we use this technology the right way, and I'm going to use Brett's example on the writing of code, or even Jaime when he talks about helping build a solicitation, you know what's going to happen? We're really going to become experts at what we do, because then we become the experts that evaluate that ability, that document, that code that came out to determine, hey, how do we use this? How do we use this efficiently? I think that all too often, a lot of our contracting professionals are spending too much time churning paper and copying things down from FAKEBus, or well, now it's all sam.gov. But give me a screen print of this to prove that this company is responsible, right? I'd rather get to, am I really making the responsibility determination? Do I now have data from various sources that enables me to say, it's not just what you certified, but here's what people are telling me about you out here in the real world. Here's your reputation with state, local, federal government. These are the things, the more data you have, the better the decision making will be, frankly. But you need to get that data in a quick manner and be able to separate fact from fiction, if you will, so that you can assess that data and make your decisions. So this is where I think the tools can take the expertise that we have and let us apply that expertise more efficiently, more effectively to get a better decision. The verbal, I don't care who writes the damn code. When you come in and meet with me, I will ask questions that will tell me if you know what you put in that code. I will, right? That's what our CISOs, that's what our CIOs and the staff, the CTOs, et cetera, that's what they're going to do. That's what they want to do, by the way. That's what makes the job fun. So that's where I get excited about having tools like this, because it can make you more efficient and let you apply that expertise that you have. But you do have to be careful with it.
I agree. And I couldn't agree with Jaime more. I think the one side of the coin is this is really scary. And the flip side of the coin, even in the example we were talking about with code, I mean, some of our developers are using this to say, here's a line of code. Tell me how a hacker might exploit this. What are the vulnerabilities in, because I'm just one person that knows what I know, and this is how I wrote the code. And now you're using a model that's been trained on billions of lines of code to maybe help you make it even more secure, right? Or just to identify potential vulnerabilities in those kinds of things. So the tool can be used both on the positive and the negative, for sure.
Yeah, and to that point, I don't know if we were talking about it. All the days flow together now. But right, that's what I was telling companies that are interested in using these kind of tools or AI, and especially with software development, is that you don't sell software development, you sell security, right? You sell trust, right? And that's the environment that we need to be into. So like to Soraya's point, right? If we're doing a code challenge, right? It's like, okay, you got 30 minutes, write this code, right? You're not gonna be able to use ChatGPT, right? You got to use the code, but it's a good way, certainly for training, to do modeling and prototyping and ensure that the code is correct and that the code is secure right before that. So that's a great way to kind of do like prep right for those exercises and using these kind of tools. And it also helps the government like have better skill sets in these kind of things, because we need to quickly adapt and have the skill sets in house as well. Because all right, you wrote code, great. Well, how do I know it's secure, right? How do I rate it? Is this good code, right? Maybe these kind of tools can help me understand that skill set better. So that's definitely another angle of usage for these kind of technologies, is to really skill up the workforce. But to Sarai's point, at the end of the day, ChatGPT or otherwise, right? It's low to high value work, right? I want our contracting professionals, I want our IT professionals focused on that high value mission oriented work. I don't want them pushing paper. We've got enough of that. We need to get it out. I mean, I want to live in a paperless world of procurement. I mean, I don't think we'll ever get there. That's one of my dreams, but certainly these kind of tools are important steps, I think, to help us get there one step closer.
We dream about weird things, don't we?
Yeah, I'm funny
so-
that way.
Yeah, we all are. I mean, all these procurement folks. So one last question that I will ask, and then we'll turn it over to the audience. I see some people have already submitted questions. Please feel free. We'll try and get to as many as we can. But so just as we're talking about security, you know, GTSC's background is all homeland, all security. And luckily we have Soraya, who's all homeland, all security, all procurement, which is terrific. But the question is kind of, what do you see as components that would go into almost a quote FedRAMP for ChatGPT?
I mean, components within the Department of Homeland
Right,
Security.
like trying to figure out what are the rules or what are the hoops that a company that would want to be selling you ChatGPT would need to go through. And I know it's very, very early, but you know, that's what we're here for, bleeding edge.
Right. Well, I think you're going to have to start with primarily headquarters, right? Because headquarters is kind of driving the infrastructure and how we secure that infrastructure. And you have CISA. You're going to have to engage with CISA to better understand how we might be able to use this application in today's cyber environment, because we know the bad actors are out there and there are vulnerabilities. Look, we're talking about all the great efficiencies, and I saw one of the questions I'm dying to answer. But anyway, we saw all the efficiencies that this can bring. Some people even think it could do decision making for human beings. I'm not there yet. But we also know that there are a lot of vulnerabilities when you use applications like this, because you don't know who's feeding it data, right? You don't know where its data is coming from. I asked it a few political questions, and it was interesting how it came back with a lot of biased information. It wasn't horrible, but it did come back with some biases. So important to understand that you're not controlling if you're not controlling the input mechanism, you know, what the data is, where it's pulling its data from, you could get bad data in there. You could get data that creates situations that you don't want. So I would say that you're going to start at DHS headquarters and talking to those headquarters elements that are driving a lot of the policy and decision making, not only within DHS, but across the federal space. You have CISA, who deals, you know, with the cyber policy across the government, as well as the DHS. But then you have the DHS specific components, the CIOs within those components is who you're going to really have to talk to. And they are CISOs and they're CTOs. And again, I want to emphasize that I think you gotta crawl before you take off running. Everybody wants to take off running. Like I said, there's a question, oh, well, why can't it make decisions for humans? Well, I just gave you a couple of reasons why it can't make decisions for humans. We will take some of that bias out of the equation based on what we know. We may introduce other biases, fair argument, but those of us who have been trained to think about small business, think about best value, you know, think about within best value, what that really means and what a trade-off analysis means, we're probably going to be better able to do it than the ChatGPT. What the ChatGPT will give us is the information we need to make those types of decisions. So again, that's the way I would answer that question. It's not going to be a component specific. I think it's going to be more within certain functions of a component that you have these discussions. And don't forget our friends in legal counsel.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I think you make a really important point, Soraya, because it has to be also weighed, and you all are the minds that are weighing this at this time, of whether it's an improvement over what we have now. So it's not just a matter of, oh, it doesn't always turn out the way we want it to. I'm sure that everyone on this call can attest to a procurement that didn't go the way it was supposed to go now. So what is the measure of a better practice and making sure that this adds to our arsenal of tools to do the best procurements? So it's kind of a broader strategic look in addition to kind of the details of it.
I agree.
Yeah, just to your question too, Christina, I think I don't know, and we're all speculating here because this is so new, but I don't know that ChatGPT itself would be presented through government to get an ATO. But what is coming, and literally almost overnight, is companies like Microsoft and Google in their overall productivity packages, you know, Microsoft Office and Google Workspaces, are rolling out their AI tools within all of the applications that we use every single day. And if I could suggest to everyone on the call, if you're going to watch anything, go watch the Microsoft Teams demo of what they're looking at rolling into this. Just as an example, if the government was to hold an industry day and people couldn't make the industry day, right now we might record it and you'd have to go back and watch it. What looks like they're going to use ChatGPT through a tool like Teams that most of us use every day. You'll be able to ask questions about what happened at industry day, and because Teams was ingesting all of that information and uses voice recognition, it could say that, you know, Jaime talked about X and Soraya talked about Y at industry day. You could ask it questions and it could answer based on what was discussed at that industry day. I mean, mind-blowing stuff in terms of productivity that's going to be baked in and slid into these tools that we use every day and that are ATO'd in our environments. And so I think what government and the Gov Cloud portions of those are going to have to look at is expanding the boundary beyond what we've classified as Microsoft, you know, Office today, and to look at what other plugins and connections to large language models like ChatGPT are, and how do we secure that? And I do suspect industry may get this stuff faster than the Gov Cloud portions of those tools will get it.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and Brett, you hit on a very important thing I just want to hit on is, so one of the biggest problems that certainly small businesses have in just federal government and contracting is access, right? That's probably one of the most important things that small businesses need to overcome. And these kind of tools can hopefully break down some barriers to do that. Like you mentioned that Teams, right? So I couldn't make the industry day, and I saw the recording, but I wanted to be able to interact with that program officer or that contracting officer, right? And maybe this is an opportunity to kind of do that through the AI, right? Asking the questions and almost doing like a virtual one-on-one, right? That's an interesting frontier on how to increase engagement and increase transparency. So that's a really interesting use case on the art of the possible on that type of thing. But I saw some questions in the chat about, you know, it's relevant to what we're talking about is, you know, why do we have to get FedRAMP and ATO and all this stuff? Why can't we use off-prem cloud-based solutions to prototype and test? And I have the same questions. Why can't we do that? And I think this is really heading to what I just briefly mentioned. And full disclosure, I am not an expert in any of this stuff. I just have some comprehensions of it, right? It's about zero trust. I think that's really one of the architect models of it. It's, you know, we don't want to do that because, okay, so we spend a little bit of money on a prototype, but now what do we do, right? Because we want to be able to scale and we want to cross the valley of death, which is really the development nightmare that we get into. So just from internal conversations from the experts that I've heard is moving in that zero trust direction is going to be a bit of an impediment to be able to use these kind of tools unless they're already in-house and part of the ATO developed solution like Brett has mentioned, and which is great. But you know, again, with my point is like, how do we access innovation from small businesses and not traditional companies, right? That Silicon Valley set, who may not have FedRAMP or ATO, but have really incredible solutions that we want to test and prototype. And then if they meet needs, right, how do we get that in-house? And that's a very, very difficult problem right now, because these solutions have to be secure and there's really no way around that. So certainly we can test and prototype offline. I think that's great, but now we have to figure this out, right? Not only with ChatGPT, but with AI and just innovation and other technologies, right? How do we now have that conversation earlier in the process before pen hits paper and we start spending money is, okay, so we're going to do this, then what, right? Let's start thinking a little bit downrange. And I'd like to have more of that thinking and that type of maturity into thinking about these solutions. And that's what I'm personally doing at State Department, just from some lessons learned that we've had and what I've had personally trying to do these things is, right, how do we now get into an environment where we can have those hurdles already understood, right? So we can start the planning of it. And now start working with our security folks and legal to try to prototype and maybe do some kind of subprod license in the types of things that we want to do for the security architecture and create that infrastructure, right? That's what we're missing. And that's what I'm trying to look at State Department is how do we create the infrastructure so that we can now bring these things or have a pathway to bring them in in-house and test and prototype in a secure environment, right? Because that's really, I think, what's critical and what's going to drive a lot of the future of adoption of these technologies is making sure when I say, you know, cyber ready, AI ready, right? These are all the things that we have to consider, because if we don't, we're going to just get very frustrated, waste a lot of money, and then have great solutions that are just sitting there and we're not going to be able to scale them. And that's what we're trying to avoid, right? We want to be able to implement these tools. And these are some of the challenges and risks that we're facing from the government side.
So, Soraya, I don't know if the question that Jaime kind of alluded to was the one you were really wanting to answer, but the question was, suppose government institutions use a web browser-based application instead of a downloadable one that must be in the four corners of our on-prem environment and have an ATO or FedRAMP approval. Wouldn't that provide more momentum in early adoption? We do this with tools we leverage at my agency. So I don't know, Soraya, Brett, if you have comment on that, but
yeah, I mean, look, the CIOs of the world, the CIOs in the federal government are interested in bringing these technologies in, but they also have to protect the environment. So I think a lot of them are coming up with smarter ways that we can use OpenAI and other tools like that to improve efficiency in the federal space. What I think concerns everybody is that you have to protect the environment. Time and again, it has been demonstrated what happens when bad actors get into our systems, right? And in the impact that it can have on us, the human beings. And in certain agencies, that can have an impact on people's lives. They're very life or death situations. So they do have to be careful. And it is a whole host of players that come into this. But I certainly think that our CIOs are out there, at least the ones that I've worked with in the past and the ones that I'm hearing from now, they're looking at how do we simplify this process? How do we make these tools more readily accessible to the workforce in general? Because here's the deal, we all confront the same workforce issues. We all confront the same issues, whether it's Brett's company or State Department or Department of Homeland Security or Bobby Joe's machine shop. We all face similar problems. And now that we're working more from home, which is not going to go away, that adds to that layer of complexity. So I do think that, yes, CIOs are working on ways to bring the technology forward to try to get the FedRAMP and the ATOs done a little quicker and more efficiently. I thought about asking ChatGPT about that because my experiences have not been great in that area, but I'll just leave it at that. But that wasn't the question. The question, I already answered it, was on the whole decision making. Somebody implied that because it could beat somebody at chess, well, it could do the job of the 11 and 2. I would challenge that. I don't think you can do the job of the CFO, the CPO, et cetera, the CIO in an application. The ultimate decision making, when we make decisions, they're not all objective. Think about that for a moment. Nobody makes a 100% objective decision. Very rare.
The quote I've heard, Soraya, to your point, is AI will not replace people or our jobs, but people that use AI may replace people that don't in their jobs. And so that I think really crystallizes what you're saying.
That's correct.
In a nutshell, yeah. That really is it. And it will enable us in applying our judgment to base it on more data. Today, we use judgment, but we're using it with more limited data. This gives us the opportunity to get more data, more information in our hands for decision making.
Absolutely. So another question, she's actually asked two questions. Prompt injection is an attack that can be used against LLMs coming from secure coding, and SQL injection attacks being top of the threats. And one doesn't need programming expertise to inject prompt poisoning. Boy, that's like an onomatopoeia, right? And her other question is, how will you or that was more of a statement. So how will you ascertain if a supplier is using AI and with appropriate guardrails?
Okay.
Give us all the answers, people.
Well, no, I do think that it's about the conversation you have with your vendors, right? I think that in the evaluation process, when you want to know if a proposal, by the way, maybe because I had so many years of experience, I could tell professionally written proposals from proposals written by the company themselves. You really can tell the
Yeah.
difference, especially if you review a lot of proposals, because some of them are using the same proposal writers. There you go. But anyway, I think it's about the conversation. That's why I'm a huge fan of oral presentations or tech demos, check challenges. Can't say that 3 times real fast. I think that's extremely important because that's where the knowledge and capabilities of the company really come to play. That's when you know whether the people that are sitting at the table actually wrote that proposal, were engaged in that. And that's where you can ask intelligent questions, if you will. Our evaluators are quite capable. They're not dummies. A lot of them came from the industry. They know what questions to ask. So I think it's the combination of those two things that it's going to make us good. I don't really care who you use to write your proposal. When I start asking you the hard questions, I'll know. It's like an interview. You can hire a professional to write your resume. But when you go in that interview, you're answering the questions.
Yeah, I think,
Yeah, go ahead, Brett, sorry.
it's more about, it's less about maybe sniffing out who may have used AI in their proposal response. That's
Right.
going to be generic, right? Whatever is produced is not informed with the context of your business and your experience in your company. So yeah, the government may receive a proposal that was generated using a tool like this, and it's going to be a generic response with maybe a well-written set of steps, but not necessarily the context. And so I think in the short term, that's less of a risk. Where I see this going though, and as a next step, is that you have this large language model with like a ChatGPT, and that we layer on training that model with some of our contextualized information. So as an example, there are already a few startups. Here in the Reston Town Center, there's one where we work, where they're looking at also training a model on all of your winning proposals, for example. So if Metaphase has written 100 proposals and we won 50 of them, we train the model on those 50, and it uses all of ChatGPT plus the contextualized layer of our specific experience and information and approaches. And when that happens, I don't know where that's going to take us. It may be where the government has to shift to more oral-based presentations and things like that to really judge if a vendor is able to deliver on what they're saying versus providing a really well-written proposal.
But I'll give you the positive side of that. When you do something like that, now you can train your people that are coming in on how your company operates. What are the resources and the capabilities of the company? That's where you promote efficiencies. And that's what I'm trying to get at, that it's all in, look, you can't make an unethical person ethical. If they're going to be unethical, they're going to be unethical. I'm not concerned about those. I'm more concerned about ethical companies, making sure the companies are ethical and use it in a smart way. And I would say that generally speaking, most companies out here are going to be ethical in their approach. So we can weed out the unethicals. It's how we use it and how we make ourselves more efficient. I think that's the key word here, efficiency in how we take information, take data, and synthesize it into information that we can use for decision making. I like to distinguish between data and information because they're very different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm less concerned about a well-written proposal. I'm more concerned about a well-written requirement, right? That's what I want to get into is, I want to have a good, solid requirement so I can have a better outcome, right? And then use these kind of tools to ensure performance meets the outcome, right? I don't care about the proposal so much. I want to make sure that the requirements are sound so that we understand what we're trying to do, right? That's kind of where I'm at. Yeah, and Sarai is absolutely correct. I love oral presentations just because I love the show me, don't tell me model. I think that's more successful. And I think, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I think, for industry. Some of them love it, some of them hate it. I think it's more resource intensive, but at the end of the day, it certainly ensures the government gets what it really needs. If you do have a good set of requirements and you have an oral presentation that provides the opportunity to see the team in action, right? The team that are going to deliver, right? That has to be part of your requirement, is the folks that are going to execute or the folks that are going to present, right? So I can see exactly what it is that I'm buying and start maintaining that relationship and start creating strategic relationships with my supplier base and not transactional vendor one-offs where it's like I deliver code, you pay me, and there's no relationship there. I'd like to get away more from that model and more from a model of, less paper, more conversations, and more thinking and execution towards successful outcomes for the mission. That's where I want to be. And I think these kind of tools are an interesting opportunity to help us move in that direction.
We have so many questions. We have 5 more minutes. So you'll just have to come to the FITGov Summit in May to talk about this in person and more. But we do have a question. ChatGPT almost functions as a searchable card catalog of data of various quality. What do you, or who do you envision owning this tool at an agency?
So the way I would say it is, we ask our CIOs to protect our infrastructure, and we've created in government this chief data officer function, which I still think, my opinion, should be married to the CIO, because that way it's generically owned. I don't think one organization can own the data. There will be procurement data, there will be historical data, there will be IT data, there will be financial data. I mean, the data is boundless, right? There's a ton of it. So I don't think it should be owned outside of perhaps that IT infrastructure. Now, the quality of the data is affected by all of the different elements in the organization. And so those elements have to make sure that their data that they're inputting is accurate. But frankly, I don't think that I, as a chief procurement officer, want to own the technology that holds the data. I'm responsible for the data and feeding it in, making sure it's accurate going in. And that's kind of the way we operated at most of DHS, as far as I know. And I think that's the way most agencies really operate, that the owner of the data is responsible for its accuracy going in. Who processes that data and feeds it back, I think, has to be within the IT shop, because that's the only way you're going to really secure it. Think about it. Or else we're all going to have little mini IT shops floating around.
We'll soon have a chat AI, or not chat AI, but an AI chief officer at the table too.
Yeah.
Because that decision-making table is getting bigger every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we got to get away, to Soraya's point, from having 50 licenses all over the place for like the same thing, right? I want to consolidate it so that we can have different uses for it, but it does need to be an enterprise level. I mean, that's the most effective way of using these kind of technologies, because right now we're very stovepiped and we've got licenses all over the place for the exact same thing. And that creates a nightmare for us. It creates a nightmare for the company. I mean, I've got companies coming to me saying, hey, can we put an ELA in place? Because you guys are killing us with all this administration of all these licenses all over the place. So I'm like, okay, thanks for letting me know. But right, let's try to consolidate and do some better like category management from that standpoint, so we can get better demand aggregation for data and understand where the data is and who owns it. But nonetheless, the technology should be at the enterprise level ownership so that we have control, right? That's ultimately what we want to do.
Brett, you have anything to add?
So I also just think beyond ChatGPT specifically being used within the federal government, there are lots of other use cases that industry should be getting excited about and can be getting excited about. I think other tools like copy.ai out there help with things like marketing, social media generation, and things of that nature that I think could really help, to Soraya's point earlier, just help small businesses level the field with some of the larger corporations that have overhead to do those kinds of things. And so that's what I'm most excited about, just looking forward, outside of the, I don't know, more controversial use cases that have security and other implications.
You went mute. You're mute.
Oh, geez. Oh, geez. And I thought I pushed it. Thank you. This has been a tremendous conversation. We're even seeing in the Q&A so many thanks for all of you spending your time talking about this today. We didn't get to answer all the questions, but again, May 24th, mark your calendars and come visit us in person to talk about many of the governance issues, not only with AI, but with zero trust, with cybersecurity. Really, everything is coming down to governance and security. because looking at these new technologies and then actually implementing them, like we talked on our call yesterday, don't even talk about implementation yet. So we're here to make everyone smarter, and certainly to make that connection between government and industry. Jaime mentioned it, Soraya mentioned it. I know Brett's all on board, but these are the top leaders in thinking in the government for a reason. And that's because we really can't adopt and know everything without talking to one another. So the industry and government connection is incredibly important to walk through, just having us all know the questions we need to ask. So there's that famous Rumsfeld saying about, they're the questions they're the questions you don't, and then they're the questions you don't even know to ask. Talking with industry and government is where that happens. It's where we're able to learn to be smarter than the AI, which hopefully we always will be, because I'm hearing a lot of job loss in this conversation. So thank you all very much for joining us today. And we look forward to doing more of these state-of-the-art conversations before the FITGov Summit stages in May. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.